Me, 23, finishing up my psychology degree. I felt like I had life pretty figured out, especially when it came to relationships. You read enough textbooks, you see the patterns, you learn the language of emotional intelligence, attachment styles, and toxic dynamics. My friends all came to me for advice. I was the expert. At the time, I was dating Joseph. He was 25, an engineer. We'd been together for about 2 years. He was the definition of stable. Good job, nice apartment, never missed a bill. He remembered my coffee order and always made sure my car had gas. He was reliable, predictable, safe. And I was starting to realize that safe was just another word for boring. My life felt like it was expanding, like I was meant for something more exciting. His world seemed to stay exactly the same. Work, home, gym, weekend projects. I started seeing all the little signs of his complacency. He didn't want to go to the art gallery opening I was excited about. He wasn't interested in deconstructing the latest documentary on social justice. I'd try to talk to him about the patriarchy or systemic issues, and he'd just listen politely and then ask what I wanted for dinner. It felt like I was talking to a wall, a very kind, supportive wall, but a wall nonetheless. I was doing all the emotional labor, trying to pull him into a deeper level of connection. He seemed perfectly happy on the surface, and that was the problem. I decided I deserved a partner who would challenge me, who would grow with me. So I picked our anniversary as the day to do it. Seemed fitting, a clean break. We went to that little cafe we always used to go to, the one with the mismatched chairs. I had my entire speech rehearsed. I laid it all out for him, using all the right terms. Explained that our growth trajectories were diverging. That I needed someone who was actively engaged in self-improvement on an emotional level. I told him he was a good man, but he wasn't the right man for the woman I was becoming. I braced myself for the fallout. Tears, anger, begging me to reconsider. Instead, he just looked at me. There was no big reaction. He just finished his coffee and set the mug down very deliberately. He nodded slowly. He said he understood. I was taken aback. I asked him if that was it, if he had nothing else to say. He looked out the window for a second, then back at me. His expression wasn't angry or sad. It was just empty. He told me he was tired. Just that. Not tired of me, specifically, just tired. He said he was tired of feeling like he was always doing something wrong, even when he was trying his best. He wished me luck with my growth and said he hoped I found what I was looking for. Then he stood up, left a 20 on the table, and walked out. I sat there for a good 10 minutes, stunned. The lack of drama was almost an insult. It was like our 2 years together didn't even warrant a fight. But then I reframed it. Of course he didn't fight. It was passive aggression, a classic sign of toxic masculinity. He couldn't express his emotions properly, so he just shut down. This realization actually made me feel better. It validated my decision completely. I immediately texted my best friend, Gloria. "It's done. I'm free." She replied instantly with a string of champagne bottle emojis. We met up for drinks that night to celebrate my newfound independence. Gloria was on the same wavelength as me. We spent hours talking about how men needed to evolve, how they were emotionally stunted and couldn't keep up with strong women. We felt so powerful, so sure of ourselves. I posted a story online, a picture of my cocktail with a caption about knowing your worth and refusing to settle. The next few weeks were a blur of excitement. I downloaded all the dating apps. It was a huge ego boost. Suddenly, I had dozens of men trying to get my attention. It was a complete reversal from my life with Joseph, where I felt like I was the only one putting in any effort. I went on a few dates. Some were duds, but it was all part of the fun. Then I matched with Gene. His profile was magnetic. He was a photographer or a musician or something creative and interesting. He had pictures of himself traveling, at concerts, with a big group of cool-looking friends. He was exactly the type of man I'd been dreaming of. Our first date was incredible. The conversation just flowed. He was witty, charming, and he actually listened. He asked me about my studies and seemed genuinely fascinated. He wasn't like Joseph at all. He was spontaneous and unpredictable. We ended up staying out until 2 a.m. just talking. It felt like a movie. For the next month or so, things with Gene were amazing. He'd text me in the middle of the day to say he was thinking of me. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout from that new Thai place I mentioned wanting to try. He was passionate and intense. It was everything I thought I was missing. Of course, there were little things. He was a terrible texter. Sometimes he'd disappear for a day or two, then pop back up with a casual, "Hey, what's up?" He never wanted to make plans more than a day in advance. Everything was, let's play it by ear. I brought it up with Gloria, a little worried. She told me to relax. She said that's just how high-value men are. They're busy. They have their own lives. It was a good thing. It meant he wasn't needy or codependent like Joseph. That made sense to me. I was an independent woman. I didn't need a guy who was attached at the hip. So I ignored the little pit of anxiety in my stomach. Around this time, Gloria started having problems with her own boyfriend. He was another one of the stable types, worked in finance. Very sweet, very dependable. Gloria had been trying to fix him for months, getting him to go to therapy, to be more emotionally vulnerable, to take up salsa dancing with her. One evening, she called me, sobbing. He'd broken up with her. She said he came over, packed a box of his things, and told her it was over. His reason was baffling. He said he just wanted to be left alone. He told her he was tired of feeling like a project that needed constant improvement. He just wanted to come home from his stressful job, watch sports, and not have to have a deep, soul-bearing conversation every night. Gloria was furious. Can you believe the nerve? He'd rather watch football than work on our relationship. I comforted her, of course. I told her he was a coward, that he was afraid of true intimacy, that he couldn't handle a woman who challenged him to be his best self. We spent the night trashing him and all men like him. It was us against the world of emotionally unavailable men. A few weeks later, our friend group planned a weekend trip to a cabin. It was a co-ed group, a mix of couples and singles, or at least it used to be. Our friend Arthur was supposed to come. He was one of the good ones, always kind, respectful, a great listener. The day before we were supposed to leave, he backed out. He sent a message to the group chat saying something came up and he couldn't make it. I texted him privately to see if everything was okay. He replied a few hours later. Yeah, all good. Just gonna help Joseph with his project car this weekend. Catch you guys next time. I thought it was weird. Arthur didn't even like cars. And why was he hanging out with my ex? They were friends, but not that close. The cabin trip felt off. The gender balance was skewed. It was mostly my female friends and a couple of guys who were dating them. The conversation kept circling back to relationship problems. Another friend mentioned her boyfriend had recently become distant. He'd taken up fishing and was spending every weekend at the lake with his buddies. She complained that he never wanted to go to brunch anymore. It was like a strange pattern was emerging, but we didn't see it clearly yet. We just saw it as a bunch of individual men failing to meet our standards. When I got back, my own situation with Gene was starting to get frustrating. The disappearing acts were getting longer. The last-minute plans were becoming the only plans. I felt like I was constantly on edge, waiting for him to grant me an audience. I realized we'd been seeing each other for nearly 3 months, and I'd never met any of his friends. I didn't even know where he lived. He always came to my place. I decided it was time to define the relationship. I needed to know where I stood. I was tired of the ambiguity. I brought it up the next time he came over. I tried to be cool about it. I just asked him what he thought this was. He laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just a genuinely surprised one. He said, "Whoa, let's not get all serious. I thought we were just having fun." My heart sank. I told him I wasn't just having fun. I had real feelings for him. His whole demeanor changed. He became distant, cold. He told me he wasn't looking for anything serious. He thought I knew that. He said I was a cool girl, and he didn't want to ruin it by putting labels on things. It was a masterclass in deflection. He left soon after, saying he had an early start the next day. He kissed me at the door, but it felt different. It was final. He didn't text me the next day, or the day after that. A week later, I caved and looked at his social media. There was a new picture, him on a beach, with his arm around another girl. She was laughing. He looked happier than I'd ever seen him. The caption was just a heart emoji. I felt like a complete fool. All that time, I thought I was in this passionate, exciting romance. In reality, I was just a convenient option for him until someone better came along. The worst part was the humiliation. He hadn't just rejected me. He'd made me feel insignificant. I cried to Gloria for hours. She was amazing. She brought over ice cream and a bottle of wine. She told me Gene was a classic narcissist, a sociopath. She said I was lucky to be rid of him, that I had dodged a bullet. And I believed her. It was easier than admitting I had been naive. It was easier than admitting that my expert judgment of character had been completely wrong. We decided to have a girls' night to cheer me up. I texted our group chat, the one with Arthur and the other guys in it. "Drinks Saturday night, my place?" The responses were slow and strange. One of the guys said he had to work. Another said he was starting a new workout routine and was avoiding alcohol. Arthur's reply was the most jarring. "Can't make it. Boys' poker night." I asked who was going. He listed off the names. Joseph, Gloria's ex-boyfriend, the guy who'd taken up fishing, a bunch of other guys from our extended social circle. It was like they had formed their own separate group, a boys' club. Gloria was livid. "They're doing it on purpose. It's because we broke up with their friends. They're taking sides." It seemed plausible, a petty act of revenge. The idea that they might just genuinely want to hang out with each other without us didn't even cross our minds. So, our big co-ed hangout turned into another girls' night. We sat around my living room, and the conversation was the same as always. Complaining about how hard it is to date, how men are trash, how we are all strong, independent women who don't need a man. But the words started to feel hollow. I looked around the room at my friends. We were all smart, funny, attractive women, and we were all single and miserable. Something wasn't adding up. We were supposed to be the prize. We were the ones doing the work, going to therapy, reading the books. We were the enlightened ones. So why were we the ones sitting alone on a Saturday night while the emotionally stunted men were off having fun without us? I pushed the thought away. It was too uncomfortable. I decided to get back on the apps. I just needed to find a better man. Gene was an anomaly. But this time the experience was different. The apps seemed like a wasteland. The quality of men seemed to have plummeted overnight. The profiles were lazy. The messages were crude or just plain boring. Every conversation felt like a chore, an interview where I was the only one asking questions. I'd match with guys who seemed decent, but they'd ghost after a few messages. I lowered my standards. Then I lowered them again. Nothing worked. I felt invisible. The validation I'd gotten before was gone. It was like the dating pool had been drained and only the bottom feeders were left. I started to feel a real sense of despair. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had done everything right. I'd left the boring but stable relationship. I'd gone after the exciting guy. I'd cut out the toxicity. I was following all the rules that modern dating gurus preach. So why was I more alone than ever? My social life was shrinking too. The big group hangs just stopped happening. Without the guys to bridge the different female friend groups, everything just sort of splintered. My world became smaller and smaller. It was just me and my echo chamber of angry, single friends. We'd meet for brunch and have the same conversation on a loop. It started to feel less like a supportive friendship and more like a group therapy session that never ended. We were all just reinforcing each other's misery. One afternoon, I was walking home from class and I saw him. Arthur. He was coming out of a hardware store, carrying a plank of wood. He looked different, more relaxed, healthier. I called out to him. He seemed surprised to see me, but he smiled politely. We made some awkward small talk. I asked him what he was up to. He told me he was building a bookshelf. He'd gotten really into woodworking. He showed me a picture on his phone of a coffee table he'd just finished. It was actually really impressive. He seemed so passionate about it, more animated than I'd seen him in years. I asked why we didn't see him around anymore. I tried to make it sound casual, like a joke. Don't like us anymore? He didn't laugh. He just shrugged and said life had gotten busy. He told me he was spending less time going out and more time on his hobbies. He said it was making him happy. He didn't mention us. He didn't blame anyone. He just stated it as a fact. His new life, without our social circle in it, was better. The conversation was short. He said he had to get going. As he walked away, I felt a chill. It wasn't malice. It wasn't revenge. It was indifference. We had become irrelevant to him. And I had a terrifying thought. Maybe it wasn't just him. Maybe we were becoming irrelevant to all of them. That brief encounter with Arthur shook me more than I wanted to admit. His indifference was like a slap in the face. I tried to bring it up with Gloria, expecting her to be outraged on my behalf. Instead, she just scoffed. She said Arthur was probably just embarrassed to be seen buying supplies for such a low-value hobby. She claimed he was secretly miserable and just putting on a brave face. Her explanation sounded weak, even to me, but I went along with it. It was easier than confronting the alternative. The following months passed in a dreary haze. My life, which had once felt so full of possibilities, had become incredibly small. My routine was class, gym, and then back to my empty apartment. Weekends were reserved for brunch with the girls, where we'd dissect the same failed dates and complain about the same problems. The group chat was a constant stream of negativity. Every conversation felt like we were picking at a wound, never letting it heal. One of our friends tried to set me up with her cousin. She described him as a nice, stable guy, the same words I once used for Joseph. I felt a flash of irritation. I didn't want nice and stable. I wanted excitement. But desperation won out. I agreed to meet him. The date was excruciating. He was a perfectly pleasant person. He had a decent job. He was polite. He asked me questions about myself. But I couldn't stop my mind from judging him. His shirt was a little wrinkled. His jokes were a bit lame. He talked about his fantasy football league. I felt nothing. No spark, no chemistry. It was like I was going through the motions. I ended the date early, making up an excuse about having to study. I knew I was being unfair. He was probably a great guy for someone. But he wasn't Gene, and he wasn't what I thought I deserved. I felt a strange sense of loss for the easy comfort I once had with Joseph, a comfort I had mistaken for boredom. I pushed the feeling down. I was just in a slump. One Saturday afternoon, I was driving home and took a detour to avoid some traffic. The route took me past a local park near an industrial area. I saw a few familiar cars parked on the side of the road. Curiosity got the better of me. I slowed down and looked. There, under a big shady tree, was a whole group of them. Joseph, Arthur, Gloria's ex, the fishing guy. They had Joseph's old project car there, the one he was always tinkering with. The hood was up. They weren't just standing around. They were busy. Joseph and another guy were leaning over the engine. Arthur was sanding a piece of trim. A couple of others were sitting in lawn chairs, cleaning some tools and talking. There was a grill set up, and one of them was flipping burgers. It wasn't a party. There was no loud music, no girls around. It was just calm, productive. They were working together on something tangible. They were laughing. Not loud, obnoxious laughs, but easy, comfortable chuckles. They looked completely at peace, happy even. I just sat in my car, watching them for a few minutes. There was no drama, no tension. No one seemed to be trying to impress anyone else. They were just existing, enjoying each other's company and working towards a common goal. I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. It was envy. My social life was built around complaining and analyzing. Theirs was built around doing. I drove away before they could see me, my mind racing. My entire worldview was starting to crack. We had written these men off as simple, boring, and emotionally inept. But from where I was sitting, their lives looked a hell of a lot more fulfilling than mine. They had a community, a brotherhood. They had purpose, even if that purpose was just fixing an old car. What did I have? A string of disappointing dates and a group of friends who were just as lost as I was. The loneliness really started to hit me hard after that. The nights felt longer. My apartment felt bigger and emptier. I would scroll through my phone, looking at old pictures of me and Joseph. Pictures from a hiking trip, a holiday dinner with his family, just a stupid selfie on the couch. He was smiling in all of them. A real, genuine smile. I had told myself he was unhappy, that he was unfulfilled. But looking at those photos, I couldn't see it. I just saw a guy who was content to be with the person he cared about. I started to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe the problem wasn't his lack of emotional depth. Maybe the problem was my inability to appreciate his quiet strength. The final nail in the coffin was my 24th birthday. I had hyped it up for weeks, planning a big night out with all my friends. One by one, they started flaking. Gloria had a family thing come up. Another friend had to work late. Another just felt too drained to go out. In the end, my big birthday celebration was just me and two other friends at a half-empty bar. We tried to have fun, but the energy was just off. We took a few sad-looking selfies and called it a night by 11 p.m. I went home and sat on my couch in the dark, still in my party dress. I had never felt so utterly alone in my entire life. This was my empowered life. This was the result of choosing myself. It was pathetic. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over Joseph's contact info. I hadn't deleted his number. I told myself it would be pathetic to text him. He had moved on, but the silence in my apartment was deafening. I just wanted to hear a familiar voice. I typed out a message. "Hey, just thinking of you. Hope you're doing well?" I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. It was too transparent. I needed a reason to see him, a real-world excuse. A few days later, my car started making a weird noise, a rattling sound from under the hood. In the past, I would have just called Joseph. He knew everything about cars. It was the perfect excuse. I knew the general area where he worked. I also knew he usually went to a specific auto parts store nearby during his lunch break. It felt manipulative and crazy, but I didn't care anymore. I drove over there around noon, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like a stalker. I parked and went inside, pretending to look for windshield wipers. I wandered the aisles for what felt like an eternity. Just as I was about to give up, I heard his voice. He was at the far end of the store, talking to someone at the counter. And he wasn't alone. Arthur was with him. My stomach dropped. I almost turned and ran, but I forced myself to walk towards them. Joseph had his back to me. He was wearing a simple work polo and jeans. He looked good. He'd definitely been hitting the gym. His shoulders were broader. He just seemed more solid, more present. I took a deep breath and called his name. He turned around, and for a split second, I saw confusion in his eyes. Then it cleared, replaced by a polite, neutral expression. It was the same look I saw on Arthur's face that day outside the hardware store. It wasn't hostility. It was something worse. It was the look you give a stranger who asks you for the time. "Oh, hey, Stacy," he said. His voice was calm. Arthur just gave me a tight-lipped nod. I launched into my rehearsed story about my car. I described the rattling noise, trying to sound helpless, hoping he would offer to take a look like he always used to. He listened patiently until I was finished. He didn't offer to help. He just said, "That sounds like it could be a loose heat shield. You should probably have a mechanic check it out. There's a good one down the street." He pointed in the general direction. It was a polite, helpful suggestion, and a complete dismissal. The conversation stalled. The silence was heavy and awkward. I felt a wave of panic. This was my one shot. I looked at him, really looked at him, and the words just tumbled out. "I miss you," I said. It was barely a whisper. He didn't react. He just held my gaze. I kept going, my voice cracking. "I think I made a mistake, Joseph. I was wrong about everything. I was so caught up in I don't know what, but I was wrong. I expected something. Anger, vindication, maybe even a flicker of the old affection. I got nothing." He glanced at Arthur, who was deliberately looking at a display of air fresheners. Then he looked back at me. His eyes were not unkind, but they were completely detached. He let out a long, slow breath, not a sigh of frustration, but one of resignation. "Stacy," he started, and his tone was gentle, like he was explaining something to a child. "It's not about you being right or wrong anymore. That doesn't matter." He paused, searching for the right words. "The thing is, I'm just tired. I was tired then, and I'm a different kind of tired now." "Tired of what?" I asked, my voice pleading. "Of the game," he said simply. "Tired of the constant tests. Tired of feeling like I was always one wrong word away from a 3-hour lecture. Tired of being told my hobbies were dumb, my feelings were invalid, and my way of relaxing was wrong." He gestured vaguely towards Arthur. "It's not just me. We're all tired. All the guys. We just gave up. Not on women, not on love. We gave up on the fight." He continued, his voice staying perfectly even. "We discovered something. When you stop trying to please people who can't be pleased, your life gets very quiet and very simple. We work, we fix things, we hang out. We don't argue. We don't deconstruct every little thing. It's just peaceful." Every word was a gut punch. He wasn't saying it to be cruel. He was just stating a fact. He had found happiness by removing the source of his stress. And that source was me. It was my entire philosophy on relationships. Arthur walked over and put a hand on Joseph's shoulder, a silent signal that it was time to go. Joseph gave me a final, small, sad smile. "I really do hope you find what you're looking for, Stacy," he said. "Take care of yourself." And then they turned and walked away. They paid for their parts and left the store. They didn't look back. I stood there in the middle of the aisle, next to a rack of neon-colored fuzzy dice. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the group chat. Gloria had posted a meme. It was a picture of a dumpster fire with the caption, "My dating life." Underneath, a bunch of my friends had replied with laughing emojis. I looked at the screen, at the bitter, looping joke our lives had become. Then I looked at the door through which Joseph and Arthur had just disappeared. They weren't in a dumpster fire. They were free. They hadn't disappeared. They had just walked away, and we were the ones who had been left behind in the world we claimed we wanted. And for the first time, I realized I was completely and utterly alone, and it was entirely my own fault.